p.m. having arrived this 19th day of February 2024, the Special Committee on Maritime Admiralty Zones Committee hearing is hereby resumed. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our Ambassador to the United Kingdom, Ambassador Locsin. Thank you for attending virtually. I don't know the exact time right now you have in London. Is it 1 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m.? We see you having a hand signal of 5, so it's probably 5 a.m. Secretary, can you acknowledge the resource persons present?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to everyone. From the National Security Council, we have Deputy Director General Nestor Jerico.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone.
From the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have Attorney Emmanuel Donato Guzman. With him is Attorney Victor Lorenzo Villanueva, ASEC Adrian Bernie Candolada, and heading their contingent is Undersecretary Attorney Eduardo Jose de Vega.
Morning, Chair.
From the Department of National Defense, we have Yusek Ignacio Madriaga.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone.
From the Department of Transportation, we have Assistant Secretary Julio Ciano.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, sirs, madam.
From the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, we have Director Maria Luisa de Guzman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
He is with Attorney Albi Juarez and Mr. John Benedict Villa. From the Philippine Coast Guard, we have a Coast Guard Captain Donet A. Dolina. Good morning, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, sirs, ma'am.
From the Department of Justice, we have Attorney Freddy Ganchoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, colleagues, and everyone.
From the University of the Philippines Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea, we have Attorney J. Batong Bakal.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to everyone else as well.
For the record, also, Mr. Chairman, attending virtually via Zoom is Ambassador Teodoro Locsin Jr. And we have confirmation that Professor Robert Charles Beckman will likewise be attending virtually. That is all, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
Thank you. For the information of the resource persons present here and the members of the committee, during the last hearing, I understand that we got two commitments, delayed commitments from the Department of Justice and the National Security Council as to the water to land ratio, and then from the Department of Justice, I think it has something to do with Indonesia. Yes. So are both agencies signifying their intent, is very leading, to have an executive session, or are you all right with having a session, a hearing similar to the hearing we conducted last time? Is there any matters of national interest that would be triggered here? Indonesian matters? Wala naman siguro.
No, Mr. Chair. We have already submitted their
Yes.
position paper.
What about the National Security Council?
We already submitted the requirements,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
so we'll be asking you to amplify the submissions made, but would like to take this opportunity to we have in our midst virtually the presence of Ambassador Locsin. Ambassador Locsin, I have some direct questions unless you have an introductory statement. You know for a fact that we're having a hearing relative to several measures that would call 5 measures that would call for the establishment of a Philippine archipelagic sea lanes. And we purposely sought your attendance today because we understand that you are based near the International Maritime Office in London, and we have to get your inputs. But first, we have to know our current standing as regards the IMO. So, are you familiar, Your Honor, with what has been discussed thus far? We have conducted several hearings, or do you have a prepared statement relative to the archipelagic sea lanes, the budding bills before this committee? Secretary Locsin,
Yes.
you have the floor, and you have our
Yes,
undivided attention.
Yes, I have a prepared statement which embodies answers also to your specific concerns. If I may be allowed to proceed, Your Honor.
Please proceed. And can you indicate the specific time you have there right now?
It's 5:05.
5:05. This is fine. This is what time we want.
5:05 a.m.
Yes.
I am really sorry.
No.
It's 5:05 a.m. You're inside the premises of the Philippine Embassy in London.
Yes, sir.
So you're on Philippine soil.
That's right.
Please proceed, Your
Thank
Honor.
you very much. Honorable Senator Francis Tolentino, Chair of the Special Committee on Philippine Admiralty and Maritime Zones. Honorable members of the committee, colleagues, and distinguished guests, good afternoon to you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us to attend this public hearing on the establishment of the archipelagic sea lanes. I welcome the opportunity to discuss the proposed Archipelagic Sea Lanes Bill and the process of designation of sea lanes under the International Maritime Organization. We are already familiar with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. You may note that Part 4 of the Convention provides us with a legal regime for the designation of archipelagic sea lanes. Article 53(9) of UNCLOS states that in designating or substituting sea lanes or prescribing or substituting traffic separation schemes, an archipelagic state shall refer proposals to the competent international organization with a view to their adoption. It seems, therefore, that the competent international organization may adopt only such sea lanes or traffic separation schemes as may be agreed with the archipelagic state, after which the archipelagic state may designate, prescribe, or substitute them. It seems from the wording that the archipelagic state has first and last word. The wording confines the competent international organization to the proposals that the archipelagic state initiates or accepts or substitutes something else for altogether. The initiative is ours. No other country than ours should initiate ASLs in our waters. On the other hand, what if they do? Then it is best we beat them to a submission. Great powers tend to have their way with international organizations. The competent international authority retains the authority to adopt the proposals or not. That does not derogate one whit from the sovereignty of the submitting state. What it does is allow, indeed encourage other states to participate so that all currently conceivable international navigation needs are met. While UNCLOS does not set out the competent international organization in Article 53(9), it is widely agreed that the competent international organization being referred to here is the IMO. In 1996, the UN Division for Ocean Affairs and Law of the Sea published a list of competent international organizations to handle certain issues set out in UNCLOS. IMO was recognized as the competent international organization that adopts archipelagic sea lanes proposals in accordance with the relevant provisions of Article 53(9) of UNCLOS. The Philippines is a party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and a member of IMO. Thus, we are obliged to refer our ASL proposal to the IMO. The compelling character of UNCLOS, if I may say as an aside, is best shown by Chinese actions in our waters under UNCLOS. China is proud to have spearheaded the adoption of UNCLOS, along with the US, which dropped out at the end, though its inputs had already been made. And yet, maritime features that UNCLOS clearly accords the Philippines is claimed by the People's Republic of China. So there you have the binding nature of international commitments if it costs the strong little or nothing. Yet such commitments are better than nothing. The strong will do as they please, the weak will endure what they must. Meetings in the IMO, like in the UN, are year-round. Unlike the UN, however, the IMO is a technical agency that has limited human resources. The IMO Secretariat, which has its hands full with goal-based standards, autonomous vessels, piracy and armed robbery against ships, cybersecurity and e-navigation, is the same one that will also handle our archipelagic sea lane submission. Given the technical nature of the meetings and the wide array of technical issues that affect international shipping, most IMO committee and subcommittee meetings are held only once a year. The Subcommittee on Navigation, Communication, and Search and Rescue, for instance, where the submission and technical details of the proposed ASL will be discussed, is scheduled to have its meeting this June. Documents must be submitted 6 months before the meeting to give time for both the Secretariat and all delegations to study these thoroughly. In the case of the proposed Philippine designation of ASLs, it is also presumed that the International Civil Aviation Organization will have been advised and consulted about it. While we submit proposals for designation of ASLs to the IMO, it cannot, no more than other international organizations, involve itself in domestic matters, let alone drafting of domestic legislation. The most that it can do is assist in checking whether the ASL proposal is compliant with technical requirements of the IMO subcommittee where it will be lodged. When some of us were in Congress, the U.S. Treasury intervened when we were enacting our anti-money laundering law. We had failed to adopt one earlier on the advice of a U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Robert Rubin, who believed that regulating currency went against the spirit of free enterprise. But 9/11 changed all that. In this regard, I recommend that when there is already a final version of the bill, you may consider holding a seminar workshop on the proposed designation of ASLs. Interested member states, relevant agencies, and stakeholders, as well as an IMO representative, may be invited as participants. I would urge that. There is no substitute for hands-on experience in these matters. This is what Indonesia did prior to submitting its ASL proposal to the IMO. We need, however, to manage our expectations by stressing the discussion of the Philippine designation of ASLs will likely require more than one NCSR session. Given that subcommittee meetings are only held once a year, this means that the entire process of having our proposed designation of ASLs adopted at the IMO will require some time. I recall that in one of the meetings of DFA MOAU headed by then Assistant Secretary, now Ambassador to Kuala Lumpur, Angela Ponce, with IMO officials here in London last year, IMO was asked why no other archipelagic state apart from Indonesia has submitted designation of its ASLs to the IMO. The IMO officials opined that maybe other member states might see no benefit in designating ASLs. They added that there is also the disadvantage of dealing with too much bureaucracy in working on the designation of the sea lanes, both at the domestic front and at the IMO. They mentioned that the IMO Secretariat does not deal very often with these kinds of submissions and would need sufficient time to study the comment on any initial Philippine submissions. They even asked what the main goal of the Philippines is in designating ASLs. If it is just to monitor and manage sea traffic, they said there are other alternative options such as setting ship routing measures or traffic separation schemes instead of designating ASLs. I would have answered, only Indonesia and now the Philippines have submitted ASLs, but that is because we are the only two serious archipelagos on the planet. Name another one. The sprawling archipelagos, we are most vulnerable in this particular aspect. Our major islands are the sizes of many countries. The waterways between them offer wide approaches. We can be taken piecemeal. At this point, let me add that our ASLs must include normal passage routes for international navigation and overflight, and of course, innocent passage. We shall be required to show sufficient capability to put in place mechanisms that enhance maritime safety and give convincing proof that our proposals will enhance the positive impact of orderly vessel traffic on the marine environment and fisheries resources and fishing grounds. But this is good because we should be pouring resources into addressing those concerns anyway, and we have the president who believes in it. As I earlier stressed, we need to manage our expectations. The entire process of having our proposed designations of ASLs adopted at the IMO will not be quick, quite the contrary. But this should not discourage Congress from starting, as it has with several bills, and passing an ASL 1. Indeed, we encourage the early crafting and formal submission. If there is a felt need for ASLs, there is no time like the present to start the process. I note that the proposed bills empower the President to designate ASLs. Should there be need for technical adjustments to comply with the requirements of IMO, these can be easily done without need of returning to Congress for amendments. After initial slow going, things could come to a resolution as quick as international bureaucracies are known for. It took a while to adjust our maritime boundaries with Indonesia, but 2 decades later, Indonesian foreign minister and I were at the UN signing off on them. So whether the IMO can overrule domestic laws, let me just say that the legislated designation of ASLs is an exercise of sovereignty by the member state. True, by submitting this designation of ASLs to the IMO, we open ourselves to the possibility that other member states will negotiate for the inclusion of other routes used for navigation that may not have been included in the original submission. That is the whole point of submitting our designation, to get the views of affected states and achieve as wide a consensus as possible. In the case of Indonesia, for instance, Indonesia submitted the first and only proposal for the designation of 3 archipelagic sea lanes within its archipelago to the IMO. There was a disappointing outcome. The proposal only accounted for the designation of 3 north-south routes to the archipelago. There was no east-west corridor proposed. Both the United States and the Australian representatives considered this unacceptable, since the proposal did not meet the all routes normally used for international navigation by maritime traffic as required by UNCLOS. It seems the 2 Western powers encourage comprehensive ASLs and not exclude normal routes. After much debate, the IMO declared Indonesia's submission a partial submission of ASLs. There is a view that this declaration renders the Indonesian ASLs practically useless because there is no compulsion for maritime countries to use them. Failure to get approval seems to impart a shade of rejection by the international body, but I do not believe there is any practical or legal effect. On the one hand, what objections or alternatives are offered regarding our submissions will reveal the genuine concerns of the affected countries about their legitimate interests on the matter which we may have overlooked. On the other hand, it will reveal the real intentions. Know your friends who claim to have your back, because there lies the risk. Frontal enemies are easier to protect against. So I encourage our submission to the IMO, that it will entail a lot of work and time to produce the desired result only shows the need to do it sooner rather than late. After all, during my term as Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the DFA initiated in 2020 the designation of ASLs to the IMO by submitting a paper proposal. We therefore await the instructions of the Senate, which alone shares with the executive the power of making foreign policy. I hope we have provided useful information to the committee as regards the IMO process in the designation of archipelagic sea lanes. Before I end my address, some specific questions. What is the relationship between the Philippines and the IMO? Alongside the other member states, we and other member states constitute the IMO, on top of which we were re-elected to the IMO Council by the largest number of votes ever. This is a testament to the solid foundation laid by my predecessor, His Excellency Antonio Lagdameo, now at the UN, who made many friends in his watch, and by his able team led by Senen Mangalile, the go-to guy if you want anything done well and fast. My team, led by Ann Hernando, were able to build a yet bigger base of support on that firm foundation of friendship. We are a member in good standing, in good, if not superlative standing, at the IMO. The current Philippine ambassador to the United Kingdom is the permanent representative of the Philippines in the IMO. No other official can assume that role. We never fail to attend IMO meetings. When is the best time to make a submission, before or after the passage of the bill? For a while, I thought there is a downside to submitting already legislated submission with the risk of rejection. But so far as I can gather, there is no rejection. There is just no adoption. At worst, a partial submission is approved. There will certainly be delay as the views of genuinely affected interests are considered, as well they should be. The purpose is to avoid acrimony over important matters about which we might agree in time. As for the delayed acceptance by the IMO, what one considers as delay, another may sincerely see as time necessary to arrive at a wider, maybe wiser consensus. Sovereignty, most emphatically expressed by acts of Congress, is not and cannot in any way be overruled by another state or international organization of states. The heart of international law is to uphold the individual sovereignty of states and smoothen their interaction without the slightest derogation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Locsin. You prevented this committee from asking you questions. You answered. You were able to predict the questions that will be asked by the chairman. But thank you for clarifying everything. And I can quote two useful phrases. One is we should manage our expectations. Indeed, we should do that. And then you provided us with useful informations. Just three quick questions, Mr. Ambassador, if you still have time.
No, I do, and I have the two experts beside me.
Is the sun about to rise in London?
Pardon? No, not yet. It's still winter.
So
we're getting close to spring.
My question has something to do with our membership, our IMO membership. We receive, it's a good thing that we receive 136 votes out of a possible 168 when we were re-elected under Category C. Is that correct? There is a there is a Category C for council members. My question is there any chance for the Philippines to be part of Category A? Category A.
Thank you for that question. I was that thought occurred to me also as I sat there casting the vote. I believe this everything to do with the IMO is best addressed by those who have had a long direct experience with it, which are our teams in the IMO. I am given by Ann Hernando the 10 states with the largest interest, Category A, 10 states with the largest interest in providing international shipping services: China, Greece, Italy, Japan, Liberia, Norway, Panama, the Republic of Korea, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America. Yes.
Mr. Ambassador, is that we just passed a new law, is the Seafarers Act of 2024. And that new law would really highlight that the Philippines is the #1 supplier of seafarers. If my recollection is correct, that would total 800,000. Isn't the provision of 800,000 warm bodies a large interest enough to make us part of Category A?
It's for shipping services.
Category A is for shipping services, but I see your point. Just a few days ago, coincidentally, I attended the book launching of Lale Kalili, The Sinews of War and Trade, which is about seafarers. And when the questions were asked, I raised my hand and I said, I stand here as ambassador of the Philippines to the United Kingdom and representative to the IMO. And let me tell you that it is my duty to protect anywhere from 600,000 to 800,000 seafarers, the largest in the world. And she bowed and said that is correct. This will show you this book, which I hope to send you, and I hope will be acquired by the rest of the committee, will show the nature of seafarers. She calls it the corporeal experience of seafarers. And the leading protagonists there are Filipino seafarers, among the best. But she also notes some disturbing developments about which perhaps after I read your seafaring law, I would be appreciated if you invited us again.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. My next question has something to do with the submission of a consolidated measure once it is approved by the committee and perhaps the Senate plenary. It was not answered clearly. Should it be done prior to the approval of the president, making it a law, or even after it has been approved by the Senate and perhaps in a bicameral conference committee produce an updated version? Should it be submitted before its passage into a law, or should we wait for the president's approval, or should we do it simultaneously? Because right now the thinking of the members of the committee is to produce a measure that would give the president enough flexibility to designate the appropriate coordinates that would create the 3 ASLs. So my question is, when is the right time to submit this, given that you mentioned a while ago that the IMO Safety Committee would be meeting sometime in June, and the best time to submit a proposal would be 6 months before our submission to the committee, and that would have been last month or December. At the best. So where does that leave this committee? Nahuli na ba tayo, or are we looking at 2025, Mr. Ambassador?
No, I think we'll be looking at 2025, perhaps, but we should start already now. It's just my view. It can be a proposal that's not yet legislated. But as I said, even if it is not approved and it has already been legislated, it is a law. It in no way derogates from Philippines' sovereignty to make its own laws. I think that the problem with giving a tentative proposal is that it gives the other side, it gives the usual bureaucracy, the IMO, the excuse to also dribble the ball and say, this is really not the last word. So I would hazard submitting a legislated bill, a law already. That means that anything they do, I'm not sure what the submission of Indonesia was, the nature of it, whether it was a law or not. But in our case, they have to consider if they are a proper international organization, the fact that the foreign policy power has already spoken on this issue. Perhaps that will be. And of course, the rest of it depends on us to campaign for it.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm not going to ask you as to whether we're a member in good standing of the IMO, because apparently we're a member of good standing because we were just elected for a seat as a council member. But then again, Mr. Ambassador, since we're not late, we're still on time, do you think that it would be appropriate to submit now a consolidated draft legislation, even if it's not yet final, in the same manner as Indonesia then was given the chance to amend its legislation, I suppose, because of the non-existence of the East-West passage?
That's right, yeah.
As what Australia and the United States proposed. So do we submit it now, or do we wait for? Yes.
I would say that you complete the process. You have all the experts there, and you have experts here, and Hernando and my team that handle the IMO. Remember, this is a body that does not tolerate newcomers coming in. So, I mean, everyone who works here has had a long experience. It's not because they are promoted to a certain rank. It's because they've had long experience and it's familiar to the IMO. So when we are ready, whether we should wait to have it passed by Congress and signed by the President or not, is something that really I've always felt as an elected member of Congress before, that this is a matter that lies entirely within the discretion and wisdom of the elected representatives, senators and congressmen.
Ambassador, perhaps from your two colleagues,
Yes.
if they can just apprise and educate this committee as to the real definition of normal passage routes, which is non-existent insofar as existing laws are concerned, because this committee is
There's no definition.
is thinking right now that if we fail to designate a passageway that is being used as a normal passage route, there might be complications because originally the Philippine Coast Guard proposed 11 routes. Then it has been reduced to 3. What if the deleted 9 passageways are considered as the normal passage routes? So would this produce any conflict, considering that we don't have any exact legal definition or document that would show the definition of said
Normal
words?
passage.
Yes.
Your Excellency, Mr. Senator, what I think is, one, I think we're entitled to tell to the best of our, I believe the Coast Guard and the navigation authorities in the Philippines would know what are the normal passage routes, because we must be monitoring them. So just the accumulation of data as to what are the routes taken. In the case of Indonesia, the mistake was rather severe because it was only north-south. There were no indications of east-west coordinates. So we will be complete in that regard. We will learn from Indonesia's experience and provide as much data as it is. And if the IMO starts presenting a moving target, we will not allow that. We will object. We have a record of passages from normal navigation. That's certainly our Coast Guard should certainly have that, and that is what we will submit. And if anybody wants
Thank
to
you,
add
Ambassador.
more, yeah, the onus is on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. While you're there, can I ask the Coast Guard? In UK, they have this British Admiralty chart. In the United States, they have the United States Hydrography. Indonesia, they have their Indonesian Navy Hydro-Oceanography Office. Do we have a counterpart office or unit here in the Philippines? If we have one, Coast Guard?
Sir, I believe what we have is the NAMRIA, sir. NAMRIA, sir, as far as hydrographic survey is concerned.
NAMRIA.
It's the NAMRIA's function, sir.
So NAMRIA would be the appropriate office to produce a chart, an illustrative chart that would show our normal passage route. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe so.
And has NAMRIA produced that? NAMRIA, is NAMRIA here? Wala. Attorney Batumbakal, to your knowledge, meron ba ang NAMRIA? Can we claim to have our own chart, Admiralty chart?
Well, yes, sir. NAMRIA has been producing all of the charts that are necessary at all the scales needed internationally.
Normal passage route.
For normal passage routes, what I remember is that during the technical working group activities that were had some years ago, NAMRIA did produce a chart which indicated the routes through the archipelago, which they believed were the normally routes used normally for international navigation. But that was for the purposes of the technical discussion.
Yes,
only.
and were these routes, the charts submitted to the IMO?
No, no, sir.
So we don't have any chart, we don't have any Admiralty chart submitted to the IMO that would more or less be akin to what the British, the United States, and the Indonesian Navy has done.
Not
so
yet,
far.
sir. The closest would be the
A
chart that
technical working
accompanied
group.
the proposal submitted to the IMO. That would be the closest thing, but an official final chart not yet because that requires the adoption,
Adoption by?
the adoption process to be completed through the
Adoption
IMO, sir. By the IMO, sir. The
So,
designation and adoption
Yeah.
consultation process with the IMO to be completed.
Ambassador Locsin, do you think it's now
Yes.
time for the Philippines to submit our own charts?
Well, what I would say is that yes, apparently it's still anecdotal, our charts, but we should prepare. NAMRIA should prepare it. I had a long history with the NAMRIA before when I worked with Don Enrique Zobel. He helped establish that body. And in looking at our own version of what are normal passages, we should consult the US, UK, and the Indonesian charts as well. And that way we avoid any unnecessary conflict or disagreement. So let's get as comprehensive a knowledge of what these charts are by major naval maritime powers. And then we see. And in comparing ours with theirs and perhaps adapting theirs, we then take into consideration our own special security and maritime concerns. But to the extent possible, I think in navigation and the history of maritime history, precedent is important because familiarity with routes is actually the heart of navigation. On top of which, the history of navigation is well documented, including in the book that I shall send to you. The bodies that have done it, from the time of sailing to steam to what you have today, fossil fuel navigation. So it's all there. It just needs to get written down and studied. And the faster, the better. Because if June is too early for us, we may have missed that. So what? But if we finish everything by the next June, then we are complete, and we will also be able to anticipate how other countries and great naval powers will say, "Hey, this does not include our normal routes of passage." Why don't we do it? Either they have it or they don't. And we shouldn't allow them to present moving targets. I think it's all there. I can get that from the United States.
Thank you, Ambassador. May we ask DOJ, do we, again, lingering question, do we submit a chart simultaneously with this consolidated bills, or do we wait for the designation by the President of the three proposed ASLs, or are we bound by the three charts as mentioned by the good ambassador? Because my thinking is how can we compare something which is not yet in existence? How can we compare an unexisting hydrography chart of the Philippines which has yet to be finished by the NAMRIA? How can we compare that with Indonesia's or the United States or the British chart, hydrography chart? So on a horse before the cart before the horse. DOJ, your opinion on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to this charts, if you take a look at the IMO regulation and ISLs, Mr. Chair, the general provisions on the adoption, designation, and substitution of archipelagic sea lanes, there is a provision there that says that after your proposed ASLs have been adopted at the IMO level, then you can proceed to designate your sea lanes together with the coordinates, of course, you fix the coordinates, and then you inform the IMO of these coordinates. So in other words, you submit the chart, Mr. Chair, with the coordinates to the IMO. Then 6 months after that, the sea lanes can now take effect. So I would say, Mr. Chair, that you submit the chart to IMO once your proposed sea lanes have been favorably acted upon by the IMO already, and you have already fixed it in your own domestic regulations, Mr. Chair. This sea lanes, the coordinates of the sea lanes. Kasi ano po yung ilalagay mo sa charts mo, yung mga coordinates kung hindi pa na-fix po, Mr. Chair.
But I'm referring to the normal passage routes, which would definitely be not included in your 3 ASLs, except if 1 or 2 would overlap.
Oh, so with respect to the normal passage routes, I don't think we put that in our in the chart that we're going to submit to IMO. Because when you say normal passage routes, it would be normal sea lanes, Mr. Chair. And normal sea lanes, you don't submit it to IMO anymore. It's just a matter of domestic issuance, Mr. Chair. Ito pong mga normal sea lanes as opposed or compared to archipelagic sea lanes that would need an international procedure and consultation with user states. So yung mga ibang normal passage routes, pwede pong normal sea lanes lang yon na hindi na kailangan isubmit sa IMO.
Let me highlight Article 3.5 of the General Provisions 1998. It sets out that the IMO retains continuing jurisdiction over the process of adopting archipelagic sea lanes until such time that the sea lanes, including all normal passage routes, have been adopted. So magkakasama talaga sila. I understand Secretary Locsin is trying to recognize you. Recognize, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. Senator, when we make our submission, this will be the charts, and the charts will have everything there already, because I don't believe the IMO, nor would I even bother the IMO to ask for a blanket authority to draw our routes, our ALSs, only after they've already given us authority to do it. No, we do it. We show them what we want, and it is that which they approve. Because I can't imagine them giving carte blanche to any member. So, where is the harm? We should have our own record of what our normal routes of passage for maritime navigation. That should be there. And then we should compare it with the UK and US, because those are of universal application. The Americans, the British, Indonesia, and other maritime countries will not make up these things, because upon it rests the safety of the maritime industry. So that's solid. And we should have that in our submission along with our proposals to replace them, to add to them, but not replace them, because as you can see, when they are inadequately described, Indonesia's proposal was cut down. Let's be as comprehensive as possible. Where's the harm?
Ambassador,
We make a complete
what
case.
you're suggesting is we do away with the Indonesian experience of having a partial archipelagic sea lanes adopted.
Yes.
So, isang bagsak na lang. Probably that's the tenor of the thesis of Secretary Locsin. DOJ, is that the appropriate methodology here?
Yes.
We approve the bill, becomes a law, authorize the president to designate the 3 sea lanes with the coordinates, submit the same to the IMO in its entirety, the complete package, and then our IMO representative, presumably the good ambassador, would sit down and have this scheduled for adoption by the IMO.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know the details of the procedure, but once we do submit our proposal, of course, we need to attach some charts to show the proposed routes or sea lanes, Mr. Chair. So pwede naman po, we can attach the charts already. And we can defend before the IMO that this is already a complete system of archipelagic sea lanes, these 3 sea lanes, Mr. Chair.
Then again, the president's delegated authority can always be invoked, that in case IMO would not accept this designated sea lane, it can still be changed. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the unified executive position, Mr. Chair, that the president should be given flexibility in fixing the coordinates of the sea lanes. So although Congress can determine in general where the sea lanes will be, it is the president who would fix the actual coordinates, Mr. Chair, because of there might be a need to change some of the coordinates after consultation with IMO. But the sea lanes, where the sea lanes should be, has been determined already in advance by Congress, taking into consideration national security and protection of the marine environment, safety of navigation, and risk of pollution, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, DOJ. Ambassador Locsin, you're raising your hand.
Yes, she's perfectly right. What we provide residual power to the president to make amendments or to add to designate the sea lanes. I think an initial designation is what we're trying to avoid is having to go back to Congress. So the president, we make a submission including the president's designation of the three, as you put it, the three sea lanes, and then if in the course of arguing this case for adoption by the IMO, we encounter objections. Those objections can easily be met because you have wisely provided that the president can make amendments. So why not? But
Thank you,
really,
Ambassador.
when we go to Congress, when we go to the IMO, we better be complete with all our charts, as if that was the last demand we were making, request we were making. And we can change in the course of negotiations.
So in effect, Ms. Ambassador, after the adoption by the IMO of whatever legislative output this committee is trying to produce, and it becomes a law, would it be considered as a standalone legal document that would no longer need the ratification or approval of the Senate? So it's complete in itself after being adopted by an international body. It will not be considered as a specie of a treaty that would be referred back to the Senate for its concurrence. No more? Wala na?
I would think not. You have wisely included the residual power of the president to make amendments. But the initial proposal that we will submit should be complete, including the first designations. And if we meet some obstacles, some opposition, then those adjustments can be made without having to re-legislate, getting a congressional amendment. There's no harm in that. And I believe in these matters, because they involve the rest of the world, to be forthright, to be complete and open is in our favor. It shows our sincerity. And if they are not sincere on the other side, well, I think then we can complain and it would discredit them. But holding anything back is would be foolish.
Thank you, Ambassador. Just one question, but germane to our discussion before I ask the DOJ and the National Security Council to have their presentations, and we can let you go and you can have your breakfast in London. Just one lingering question again. There is a legal committee within the IMO, and the submission of whatever we're doing right now would be submitted to the safety committee. This is a different committee, but there is a different committee. It's called the legal committee, and
This is where
I would, if your colleagues would be interested in educating this committee, I would want to know the real definition insofar as one of the functions of the legal committee would be concerned, and it has something to do with environmental terrorism. Can one of your able colleagues,
Yes.
seated, I envy your position. You're seated between two ladies. Can one of them educate us as to the real meaning of environmental terrorism insofar as the International Maritime Organization is concerned?
So I don't think, what I can do is write you, so far as I know, I can imagine terrorism as a factor. And that has already been addressed even by us and ASEAN. I can tell you about that very briefly. But environmental terrorism is a new concept. I don't know, that must be, as terrorism, a deliberate destruction of the environment. Whether a negligent one, like the oil spills that we have suffered, as well as the rest of the Indian Ocean. Well, I don't know if you can qualify that as terrorism because I don't see what would be so far as I know that environmental terrorism seems even the accident in Chernobyl was not.
Let
was not terrorism.
let me cite the correct phrase here. The legal committee is an organ responsible for the treaties related to the suppression of unlawful acts against the safety of maritime navigation, which address among others environmental terrorism. And this is a broad function of the legal committee of the International Maritime Organization, which caught the attention of this committee. Because a lot of things are happening right now, and if you refer this to an incident which happened 72 hours ago, Philippine Coast Guard can probably amplify this. Something happened a few days ago in our Bajo de Masinloc. The utilization of cyanide. Can this be considered as environmental terrorism? Depriving fishermen of their catch. This is a long story, perhaps unrelated to our discussion right now. I'm just trying to connect this with the function of the International Maritime Organization, since they have a legal committee which is supposed to cover, among others, environmental terrorism. It can be answered today, it can be answered tomorrow. Secretary Locsin.
If I may venture, well, I think
Yes.
if it is environmental, then I suppose recklessness on the part of the polluter would, in an exaggerated way but not inaccurate, be terrorism of a sort. It's the recklessness of allowing cyanide to be spilled. Yes, it falls within that purview. And by the way, as I said, when we submit this, our ASLs, we are obliged to show them that we can protect maritime safety, and we have the means, the boats, the ports, etc., to protect maritime, to enhance maritime safety in the routes, and also to protect the environment over which those boats pass, which means we can monitor cargo ships as they pass those waters. We're going to have to invest quite a lot, but all of those investments are way overdue. And that's the beauty of the ASL bill and law.
Ambassador,
It's comprehensive.
we recognize your statement hand in hand with the soon to be a year-old commemorative. We're going to have a commemorative event concerning the Mindoro oil spill, and I understand the MT Express were found, the owners were found liable in that tragic oil spill which happened a year ago. Thank you for clarifying, Secretary Locsin. I think it's about time for the National Security Council and the DOJ. Secretary Locsin and your colleagues, we can dismiss you. I know you had I know you lack sleep. It's now what time in London?
That's about 5:30.
5:30.
5:50. I'm sorry, 5:54, almost 6. But we all had a good night's rest. I can assure you, we were preparing for this because I'm so happy that this is happening.
So I surmise, Secretary Locsin, that you'll be providing this committee that your exact words, the notes that you referred to a while ago, if that can be submitted to this committee, although our stenographers were able to catch
sir.
word by word. Yeah, Secretary Locsin.
Yeah, so I sent you a copy of the statement just now. It's there.
Duly received. Duly received.
I hope it is provided to all the members of the committee. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. So we thank the good secretary, our ambassador to the United Kingdom, to the Court of St. James. And we thank you for your service. The committee will now dispense with your honor's presence. We thank you once again, and it has been of good help to this committee as we proceed to the adoption of the Archipelagic Sea Lanes bill. And we hope that even after its passage, you will be on top of the situation because you are still our representative to the International Maritime Organization. And this is a very, very critical piece of legislation which we hope to pass soonest. And we hope to get the IMO's imprimatur soonest likewise. Thank you, Secretary Locsin. Thank you to
Thank you
your
very much,
colleagues, and good morning to you. Good day in London.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
May we now have the National Security Council for their presentation?
Kailangan mo na. That's secret.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During the last meeting, we were asked to present the water to land
Yes,
ratio.
can we have that?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Do you have a PowerPoint or what?
Yeah, we prepared a PowerPoint presentation for that subject, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, Mr. Chair, to the Honorable Chairperson, Senator Francis N. Tolentino, and the rest of the members of the Senate Special Committee on the Philippine Maritime and Admiralty Zones. We thank you for inviting the National Task Force for West Philippine Sea to provide the illustrative presentation of the Philippine map with regards to water-land ratio. As shown on the screen, the water area is 586,485.07 square kilometers, while the land area is 2,995,447.18 square kilometers, making the water to land ratio of 2:1, compliant to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, Article 47.1, which allows ratio between 1:1 and 9:1. As projected, the land area is in yellow portion, and the archipelagic waters are represented by those diagonal stripes. The archipelagic baseline system of the Philippines is composed of 101 line segments. The pink innermost line in the inverted triangle, as shown in the map, it includes all the Philippines' main islands and does not include the Bajo de Masinloc, which is the Scarborough Shoal, and the Kalayaan Island Group, the KIG. The three green lines in the illustration are the line segments from 11 to 12, 46 to 47, and 82 to 83, which exceed 100 nautical miles, but not more than 125 nautical miles, making our system completely consistent in the Article 47.2. Further, these three line segments only comprise 2.97% of the total number of segments in the Philippine map.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
DDG, how would you characterize the broken lines emanating from the western portion of North Borneo?
That's supposedly a description of our exclusive economic zone, Mr. Chair, but these haven't yet being negotiated with our neighboring country, Mr. Chair. What
about the blue or violet lines?
That's blue actually, Mr.
Blue,
Chair.
blue.
That's with the Indonesia and Philippines.
Yeah, south of Mindanao.
Yes,
These are
Mr. Chair.
still subject to negotiations.
I believe that was already
Signed. Okay.
by both countries, Mr.
So
Chair.
if it is a blue line, it has now been acknowledged by our neighbors. If it is a dotted line, what is the correct description?
This
Subject to negotiations.
Yes, Mr.
And
Chair.
that would include the portion north of the Philippines, near Taiwan.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Please proceed.
To continue, Mr. Chair, these three line segments only comprise 2.97% of the total number of segments in the Philippine map, biddable to the maximum allowable percentage by the UNCLOS, which is 3%. That ends my illustrative presentation, Mr. Chair.
What you're saying is that through this presentation, we're compliant.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Attorney Batumbakal, we're compliant. We're compliant.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
DOJ, you have a presentation. Nothing confidential.
I know, Mr. Chair, we don't have a PowerPoint, but we did include in our position paper the two assignments that you gave us last hearing. First, with respect to the 19 rules of Indonesia with respect to their archipelagic sea lanes,
I
and
read
a
that.
formulation with respect to the conduct of military exercises in our archipelagic waters, Mr. Chair.
Presentation now.
No, we did not put it in a PowerPoint, but it's in our position paper already, Mr. I can read that particular
Yes, you can
portion.
annotate. You can annotate. How long will that last?
No, very quick, Mr. Chair. First, with respect to the 19 rules of Indonesia.
Yes, can you have that flash on the screen?
Maybe the position paper can be flashed on the screen. That's all right, Mr. Chair.
Secretary? The NSC, can you flash back NSC's original map? Secretary, yung map kanina ng NSC, PowerPoint. Yung kanina. Pati yung thank you nyo, parang mapa rin. Ayan. Any conflict, overlap, legal or otherwise, insofar as the western dotted lines are concerned, in the position paper of DOJ. Any conflict? Wala.
Wala.
Because we're referring to the archipelagic sea lanes.
Yes, we're referring to the sea lanes that would pass through or traverse our archipelagic waters. That would be the waters between the islands of the archipelago. But with respect to the dotted line, Mr. Chair, that is the extent of our exclusive economic zone. So our sea lanes are in the archipelagic waters, not in the exclusive economic zone.
What
Mr. Chair.
What about the east-west passage issue raised by the United States and Australia? How would it conflict with our proposed sea lanes? Is there a possibility of that having an overlap as well?
There will be no overlap, Mr. Chair, because that east-west corridor that the US,
Saan yun
Australia,
dito?
and
Ito ba
other
yung-
states would be in the Indonesian archipelagic waters, Mr. Chair.
So what about the blue lines?
The blue lines would be the extent of our exclusive economic zone in the Celebes Sea, Mr. Chair, because in the Celebes Sea, there is an overlapping exclusive economic zones between Philippines and Indonesia. So we negotiated with Indonesia pursuant to Article 74 of UNCLOS for the
So
delimitation
there would
of
be
the
no
EEZ.
overlap, there would be no conflict insofar as the issues raised before by Australia and the United States. That
No,
will be compliant as well.
no issue with us on the
Okay.
east-west corridor? Because we do have in our 3 sea lanes, Mr. Chair, we have an east-west corridor already.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chair. Yes.
I provided a map of the proposed archipelagic sea lanes. Can you please flash
Flash
the
that.
map, the second presentation? There's the 3 proposed archipelagic sea lanes on that map, Mr. Chair, which doesn't affect the.
Can you flash that? Can you enlarge that? So can you annotate, NSC? Pwede bang palakihin pa to? Okay. Pwede palakihin pa? Pwede? Can we, oops, sumobra naman. Can you, yes, can you focus that a little bit? So, see, where is sea lane number 1, sea lane number 2, sea lane number 3?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The proposed sea lane, if you notice, that's on the northern part. That is the Philippine Sea, Balintang Channel to West Philippine Sea. That crosses east to west. Then the second archipelagic.
Addresses the Indonesian issue.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
2,
Number 2 is the Celebes Sea, Cebutu Passage, and the Sulu Sea, Cuyo East past Mindoro Strait to West Philippine Sea. That's the one from south going out to northwest, Mr. Chair. The number 2.
o alin po yon, to be clear?
No, north to south, Mr. Chair. That's the number 2.
Can someone, yes, may pointer naman pala tayo. Ito,
Yeah.
may pointer
It's
ho
the
tayo.
same, sir. That's the south to north or north to south.
That's the,
Number 2, archipelagic sea lanes.
so how do you call that now? How do you name that?
What we named that, Mr. Chair, it's the Celebes Sea, which is down here is Celebes Sea, the Sulu, the Cebutu Passage, Sulu Sea. Somewhere here it's the Cuyo and the Mindoro Strait.
Cuyo is part of Palawan.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and the Mindoro Strait.
Mindoro Strait.
Yes, that's in between Cuyo and Mindoro Strait, Mr. Chair.
And that would be near,
Our north-south passage.
would that be near the Verde Island Passage?
A little bit far, Mr. Chair.
Malayo.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And then the third,
The third, this is the Celebes Sea, the Basilan Strait, is Basilan here, in between Zamboanga and Basilan. Then the Sulu Sea, and then Nasubata Channel. This is down here, Mr. Chair, and the Balabac Strait to West Philippine Sea. Yes, Mr. Chair. Balabac, Municipality of Balabac.
the description of a sea lane would require a continuous, non-suspended journey
Yes,
between 2 points.
I'll just show you a bigger.
Ay, wala nga ako eh. Thank you, thank you. So the definition, correct me, Attorney Batong Bakal, if I'm wrong, is that this has to be a continuous sojourn,
Continuous and expeditious passage.
expeditious passage between 2 points. So that means to say, if you're utilizing ASL number 2, that would be from the point near Cuyo going down to Celebes. Tama, okay. And the same is true with the Cebutu. What's the farthest point? Balabac, because we're now referring to other definitions that would include an EEZ to another EEZ, which is part really of the definition. So it can go beyond is this a blue line or violet line? Violet ang tingin ko rito eh. Itong enclosure, yung archipelagic, yung baseline natin. So,
That's the archipelagic water,
yes,
Mr.
so
Chair.
it can go beyond. It can come. The vessel can come from within our exclusive economic zone and going to perhaps the exclusive economic zone of Indonesia. That's the definition. Okay. So my question is this: my dear resource persons, if the definition as mentioned by Attorney J. Batumbakal would encompass what's that again? An
Continuous and expeditious.
continuous and expeditious passage. Could that refer likewise to a point coming from Cuyo and going to Celebes? Turn left? Or could that also include a passageway coming from Sibutu and going to Celebes? Not necessarily your straight line from point A to point B. If I will diagram C lane number 2 as B to C and C lane number 3 as C to D, could a utilization of an archipelagic sea lane include point C to point E or point D? And that would probably have a follow-up question when we refer to the Balintang Channel, if that is point A to B. Can I utilize point D and reach point B if it is going to be an expeditious passage? Or does it have to refer just to point the Cuyo going to the Celebes point? Naintindihan nyo? Pwede ba akong lumiko? Pwede ba akong kumanan? Pwede ba akong kumaliwa? Utilizing the passageway? Any intellectual answer would be appreciated. Coast Guard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Captain Tanseco, sir, from the Philippine Coast Guard. Just to give a better context, sir, on how mariners would traverse our archipelagic sea lane once passed, sir. For one, number 3, sir, which is the southernmost passage, would be utilized by vessels coming out of Saipan, Guam, going to Singapore. So coming from the eastern portion, Pacific side, they will traverse south of our country, south of Mindanao, passing through the entry for the 3rd or number 3 archipelagic sea lanes, all the way going to Malacca Strait in Singapore. So this is a normal trade route that would be followed, sir. Now, the number 2 would be vessels coming out of Thailand, Vietnam, going to Indonesia, which is the north to south passage, which is number 2. Now, the last meeting's discussion on Balintang Channel will be taken by vessels coming out of Malacca Strait, of coming out of Singapore, going to either Taiwan, going to either Japan, Korea, and China as well, sir, because of their northern port in Dalian, China. So that's a passageway. Now, your question, can a vessel deviate or make a turn? Certainly, sir. And we will provide a system for the vessels to do that. This is called the traffic separation scheme. Just like what you have in a highway, we will designate TSS wherein vessels can utilize the TSS normal passage, which will be indicated in our chart once submitted to IMO, that vessels can use to safely transition from one route to another, either going north to south or taking another part of the archipelagic sea lanes passage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So the answer is yes, except perhaps the practicality of using ASL number 1. If you're coming from the western side of the Pacific and going to the South China Sea, you have to exit the South China Sea and re-enter ASL number 2 near the Cuyo Point. Tama? So, would that deviate from your normal definition as what Attorney Batumbakal said, expeditious? What's the other word again?
Continuous expeditious.
Continuous expeditious.
And unobstructed, actually.
Is it going to be continuous if you turn right? Because there will no longer be a traffic separator scheme if you come from the western side of the Pacific going to South China Sea, and I'm now referring to ASL number 1. Who will answer? Galing ako sa western side. Tumawid ako doon sa Balintang Channel. Biglang bumaba ako doon sa Cuyo. Papunta akong Silebes. Pwede? O baka pumasok na ako dito sa gilid ng Sambales. Dire-diretso na ako doon. Baybay dagat na ako. For the record, can that be done?
Sir, sorry po, sir. If I would like to,
Hindi ko lang maituro kasi wala akong
yes, sir.
ilaw-ilaw dito eh.
If I may, sir.
Can you get that for me? Naintindihan nyo naman? Ginugulo ko lang yung usapan eh. Kasi baka may magtanong and this will form part of the legislative history. O ba tayo, Mandar? Yun. So galing ako dito, Western Pacific, tumawid ako, pumasok ako dito sa Cuyo, sabi mo, okay. Ito mga ganito, okay lang to, may traffic separator ka. Galing ako ngayon dito, nalayuan ako dito, dito ako ng gilid-gilid sa Sambales. Sumute tuloy ako doon sa Cuyo, labas naman ako rito. Ha? Walang ano dito. Walang ASL dito. Yun, nandun.
Sir.
Pero pagilid-gilid ako sa Lingayen, daan pa ako ng gilid ng Manila Bay, baba pa ako ng Cavite City, punta ako na Sugbo, o baba ako Cuyo. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Mr. Chair, if it is outside our baseline, archipelagic waters, there's no need for us to designate an archipelagic sea lane. Normally, with your question po, sir, a vessel would normally do that, sir. They're allowed to do so.
For purposes of national security, any concern?
Definitely, if for purpose of national security, it will be a concern when they are already traversing at the territorial waters. But if they are not traversing the territorial waters, they have the right of innocent passage, even inside the territorial waters, as long they're going to traverse in a normal mode, Mr. Chair.
Wala? Okay lang sa ano? Okay lang sa definitions natin?
Mr. Chair.
Si MacArthur, dito lumanding ha? Yan, Lingayen, no?
Mr. Chair.
Yan si
If I may-
MacArthur. Dito yung mga barko namin sa Ternate, Cavite, yung mga galleon, dyan nagpa banjing. Attorney Baton Bakal, you're saying something?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually, it's being done. If I may ask the Secretary to just flash, I think this is slide number 1 that I provided. This is to give us an idea of what we're trying to manage, really. So this is a screenshot of a density map of ship passage through this area in 2022, so for the whole year. And so based on the color, you see how many ships pass through that route. So upwards of 2,000 in the reddest part, no? But this is for the entire year. So you see the route you're describing, Mr. Chair, is actually fairly common. You see the redness through the upper part of Luzon, and then along the side, and then going down north-south. So this indicates to us the intensity of traffic. Now that's normal, I think, because especially during times when ships are trying to shelter from inclement weather coming from the east, no, during typhoon season, they would try to do that when they're trying to reach down south. So this also shows us
Do we have if I may interrupt you, Attorney Baton Bakal, do we have a version of this? Perhaps a simulation of what's going to happen once we adopt the 3 lanes. Will it be constricted in one passageway? Will it be clearer? Will it be less reddish? Will it be more visible to the naked eye? The maps below, Attorney Baton Bakal. Meron ba tayong projection na ganon? Ano yung mangyayari pag in-adapt natin yung ASL? Mawala na to.
Hindi naman, sir. For one thing, we don't have the numbers for that. Second, The ASLs actually cannot use to radically alter or limit the foreign vessel passage to only a few routes within the archipelago. Neither will it affect the passage of vessels outside the archipelago. So this is not like in traffic management within an LGU where you can block roads and stuff like that. This one, what will happen really is that ASLs will affect primarily military vessels and aircraft. Commercial vessels, those will still continue. They will still use innocent passage, and those are already manageable through existing IMO rules and conventions. So the Coast Guard just needs additional assets, perhaps, and surveillance equipment to properly monitor all the commercial vessel traffic. It's really military traffic that will be affected by the ASLs.
That the DOJ, military traffic tayo, except submarines.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Except
because
submarines.
Yeah, submarines. Well, once you have designated the archipelagic sea lanes, you will not see the submarines anymore because archipelagic sea lanes passage is passage in the normal mode, Mr. Chair. But if the submarine is in our territorial sea, it's required under UNCLOS to navigate on the surface and show its flag. But if it's archipelagic sea lanes passage, it's submerged because that's a normal mode. But outside of the sea lanes, Mr. Chair, if we have 3 sea lanes only, if the submarines navigate outside of the archipelagic sea lane, it can be required to navigate on the surface and show its flag because the navigational right that is applicable outside of the archipelagic sea lanes would be the right of innocent passage, Mr. Chair. And if it's right of innocent passage, we can require submarines to navigate on the surface and show its flag, Mr. Chair.
The submarines, do we have the necessary wherewithal aside from your usual challenges? Do we have the submerged sensors that would enable the Coast Guard, the Philippine Navy to detect whether, as we speak right now, there might be submarines. There might be submarines submerged out there. Ang nakikita lang natin yung mga Chinese Coast Guards floating, but the submarines cannot be seen, di ba?
So, Chair. Yes, sir.
Yes, Attorney.
Yes, sir. First of all, I believe the AFP and the Navy have been developing the anti-submarine warfare capability. So we have some assets already, like some of the latest helicopters of the Navy are designed for that. And I know that the latest frigates have those equipment, and they're now constantly developing the capability. So soon we will have that. And even with the Marine Science Institute of UP, I remember during our research trip to Pag-asa Island in 2021, they were proposing that we can actually already put in place listening devices to record things like this. Now, and then number 2, the other thing that we have with our advantage is that if you look at the archipelago, there are actually only 7 places, 7 entry and exit points into and out of our archipelagic waters. So those are the points at which we can then have these types of devices so that if anything, they do anything wrong, we can probably also catch them either, in any one of these exit points. So that's where our capability building has to come in. So it's not just a matter of designating sea lanes. We also have to ensure, as Ambassador Locsin mentioned, we have to also ensure that we accompany that with the capabilities to really enforce the sea lanes.
Anything more? Coast Guard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to the previous position of the Coast Guard, sir, not only will we ensure the marine pollution response as well as safety, but also the security of vessels passing through our dedicated sea lanes once passed. A major requirement for commercial vessels passing through our ASL is for their AIS system, or the automatic identification system, to be turned on at all times, 24/7, once they're inside. So once we have radar stations, traffic separation schemes, vessel traffic information system in place in our designated archipelagic sea lanes, then we can better monitor those vessels going dark or turning off their AIS once they're inside our archipelagic sea lanes dedicated area, Mr. Chair. So that would better focus our resources our personals as well. And at the end of the day, sir, we can use the commercial vessels passing through the ASL with their AIS on to verify other vessels within the vicinity if these vessels are indeed turning black or turning off their AIS. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other? I understand we have Professor Beckman. Professor Beckman, are you still around? I'm sorry, we were not able to recognize your. Yes, Professor Beckman. Can you unmute? Professor Beckman?
I'm sorry, my sound is coming on and off intermittently, but hopefully, is there a precise question I would you'd like me to answer? Otherwise, I would make a few general points.
Yes, just one, which I also raised a few minutes ago, and I was specifically asking about the normal passage routes. Would the tentativity of submitting an incomplete, non-complete, loaded with presidential flexibility in terms of changing the coordinates be taken against a submitting state, making us more hesitant to provide the IMO what we really need in terms of specificity. Would that be taken against us, Professor? Because what will we be submitting would definitely be a work in progress, not yet the final document that would be approved by the International Maritime Organization.
Yeah, I would urge you to look at the resolution of the Maritime Safety Committee passed in 1969, which provides the procedures for the designation of archipelagic sea lanes. And to me, it makes it clear that you are first to consult with users, then you are to make a submission to the IMO. After the IMO approves it, then are you to pass legislation. So I think this should be taken into account, and you should.
Can we have that again, Professor?
According to
the first step, the 1969 resolution?
MSC 69-22-Addendum 1. It sets out the procedure for the adoption of archipelagic sea lanes adopted by the Maritime Safety Committee of the IMO. The procedure they set out is you are first to consult with user states, then you are to make a formal proposal to the IMO, and that would go, I believe, to the Navigational Safety Committee, but probably to the Subcommittee on Navigation Search and Rescue, NCSR. And then after it is adopted by the IMO, then you are to pass legislation making it part of Singapore law, Philippine law. So I think that I would encourage you to try to, perhaps you can be authorizing the president through the executive, make the proposal, but then it should come back to the legislature for the final approval. That is the way I read the regulations of the Maritime Safety Committee. I'm happy to send that to you. I sent it to your attorney that contacted me, that particular document.
Yes, Professor Beckman.
And as I said last time, my final point, because I have to go to class, is that you're thinking you're on the right track in the sense that the three lanes that you are proposing will be used primarily exceptions to the normal rules. Which means foreign aircraft, military aircraft can fly over those without getting your consent. and submarines can navigate submerged. And therefore, it is a national security issue. But if you have the correct sensors, you will then know where the foreign submarines are passing through submerged. But that's what I think you should think about. You should also think about the normal route of the ships that are going through the Lombok Strait and Makassar Strait in Singapore, and then Makassar Strait in Indonesia, then up to Indonesia or up to the Philippines, because that strait is likely to become more important if the capital of Indonesia moves to the new capital.
Professor, can you repeat the last sentence?
Which do you want me to repeat?
The last sentence concerning
The
Indonesia.
last sentence. All right. The Indonesians, are thinking of moving their capital to East Kalimantan. If that new capital moves, the likelihood in the future is that more ships will be passing through the Lombok and Makassar Straits and then coming up to the Philippines. Now, whether they go south of the Philippines or whether they go through the Philippines, I think that is, you must make certain that the route you propose would probably be able to handle that traffic. And of course,
It's the blue line I was referring to a while ago.
military vessels.
Go ahead, Professor.
Sorry, you have another question? Otherwise,
No. Go ahead.
no. So my main point is, I would encourage you to look at the resolution setting out the procedures, and the complication as I listened to your testimony today seems to be you want to pass the law first, where the IMO seems to assume you go to them and request adoption before you pass the legislation. So I would encourage you to consult with people at the IMO, at the Maritime Safety Committee, before you enact legislation. What you may want to do is authorize the president or the executive to propose and then somehow work it out that it's adopted formally by the Senate and House later. But it's something I think your lawyers probably know far more than I do in terms of how you will do that within the Philippine constitutional framework.
Thank you, Professor Beckman. Very enlightening, especially the proposed transfer to a new capital. I was referring to that straight blue line a while ago. Attorney De Vega from the Department of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for joining us, even if you have classes.
Just a few comments, sir. The presence of our ambassador in London, even at 5 a.m., shows the DFA's commitment to this bill and to the needs of the country and the bills that are being considered by the Senate. It's a sign of our respect for your chairmanship and what we're trying to do here. Number two, all these issues that we discussed were already discussed in an exhaustive interagency process, which led in 2019 to our creating a common executive position. And so we advocate a parallel approach. And the reason why we're advocating this parallel approach is that we just want the president to already have the authority to finalize the coordinates of the Archipelagic Sea Lanes passage. In other words, we're not already determining the final coordinates before we pass it to the IMO, which appears to be the concern of Professor Beckman. No, but we're giving him the authority such that when the IMO finally comes to agreement with us, and of course, that may include, for example, setting up in detail such things like the lane and traffic separation schemes and other issues, so forth, then there will be no more need for another legislation. There's no need for a ratification of anything here, or the concurrence ratification. We're not dealing with an international agreement such as that between states or multilateral. It's just the approval of the IMO of what we hope to be the final sea lanes passages. So we strongly believe that we are on the right track on this. You could see from Ambassador Locsin how pleased he is that the process is moving. And as for security concerns, we have full faith in the abilities of our defense forces to defend the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you likewise, Professor Beckman, for your inputs. I think we have, I agree with the Department of Foreign Affairs. We have exhausted all possible academic and practical discussions concerning this since 2009. And I think it's about time that we move forward, crafting a measure that would be, as suggested by the good professor, be likewise submitted to the International Maritime Organization, hand in hand with the current legislative intent and the geopolitical situation we are facing right now. So the sentiment of the committee, and I speak for the other members of this committee, is to form a technical working group that would consolidate the 5 measures, including the 6th measure coming from the House of Representatives, which was just approved last month. That's House Bill 9034, calling for the adoption of the Philippine Archipelagic sea lanes, and thereafter proceed with the next step, which is the submission to the Senate's plenary. So the chair is now inclined to form a technical working group to be composed of the Department of Justice, Department of Foreign Affairs, National Security Council, the NAMRIA, and if Attorney Jay Batombakal would be willing to join, to fine-tune the 5 or 6 measures into a substitute consolidated bill, we will be moving forward with the wind on our back, supported by the intellectual submissions to this committee by our resource persons, Professors Stuart Kay, Robert Beckman. We owe you a lot, and of course the wisdom coming from Secretary Locsin, and to have a finite product that would be submitted to the Senate for its plenary approval. So having, yes, Coast Guard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, sir. May we also be included, sir, in the TWG?
Yes, of course. I
Thank you,
forgot
sir.
to
Thank you,
mention
sir.
Coast Guard
Thank you, sir.
because I was supposed to mention you last. So Coast Guard will be included, and then we look forward to a March final submission of the consolidated measure, perhaps before the Holy Week. Madali na lang to. Madali na lang to. Yung last submission lang is the version of the House. So without objection on the part of my colleagues, the measures submitted will be consolidated into a single measure, and the proposed Archipelagic Sea Lanes Law, with the modification that the President is given the delegated authority to revise device in accordance with the guidelines coming from the competent international organization, which is the IMO, is hereby approved, and the same will be subjected to the technical working group before being submitted to the Senate plenary for its final consideration and approval. I thank all the resource persons present here. We will see you again during the technical working group. So approved. Thank you. Pero si